Clara Holt was only 18 when they threw her off a cliff for saying no to the mayor. The Arizona sunset bled red and copper across the jagged canyon rim, casting long shadows that seemed to reach for her like fingers. Wind cut sharp along the cliffside, carrying the murmured voices of men who had already decided what she deserved. Clara didn't stand at the edge by choice. She had been dragged there, wrists bound tight with rough rope, her head shrouded in a burlap sack that stank of mildew and rotting onions. Each shiver made the ropes bite deeper, but it was a silence that cut more than anything else. Behind her, the voices whispered. "Is it high enough?" one asked. Mayor Vernon's voice came cold and slurred, thick with drink and indifference. "She ain't getting back up." Then, the voice that turned her stomach, the one that should have defended her, Amos, her stepfather. "She shamed our name, said no to the mayor. Now she'll learn what that costs." Clara's lips were cracked from crying. Her eyes, hidden behind the sack, stared into darkness, but she heard it all. The scraping of boots against frost, the wet, hungry breath of men about to kill. The air rushed to swallow her scream. The cliff vanished beneath her feet. For a moment, she was nothing but a falling shadow. Branches clawed her as she plunged. Rocks ripped through her dress. Then, with brutal force, a ledge caught her mid-fall, snapping her ribs and hurling her sideways into snow. She didn't die, but she was meant to. Half buried, body screaming in pain, the world spun between pine-scented blood and drifting blackness. Then came the sound of hooves. Not frantic, not charging. Deliberate, steady, a figure appeared through the trees. She couldn't lift her head, but even in the haze, she felt the warmth of his presence cut through the cold like a fire. A hand pressed gently to her shoulder, then to her throat. The voice that followed was quiet but certain. "You are alive." Low, certain. He didn't rush. He didn't panic. With careful hands, he wrapped her in a fur-lined cloak and lifted her, as if she were something precious, not broken. She was placed on a horse that moved without hurry, and the world went soft again. When Clara woke, it was to the scent of cedar smoke and the low crackle of firelight. She lay on thick furs inside a small lodge. Animal hides lined the walls. A fire warmed her feet. The pain remained, but it was distant now, muffled by rest and something more tender. Across the fire sat the man. He didn't speak, didn't move, just watched. Beside her, a wooden cup steamed with something fragrant. "Tea." Her voice came hoarse. "Why didn't you take off the sack?" His eyes met hers, steady, unreadable. "I don't take what someone isn't ready to give." Her fingers clutched the furs. "You knew they left me to die." He nodded slightly. "I saw someone left behind. That was enough." The calm in him unnerved her. It was a strength that didn't need to raise its voice. She studied his face, the sharp lines, the stillness, like a stone carved from the wild itself. "What's your name?" she asked. The words barely formed. "Silver Wolf," he answered. He didn't ask for hers. Instead, after a pause, he said, "You have no name now. That means you get to choose one, when you're ready." She looked down at the cup. Steam curled upward like ghosts rising from an old world. Her hands trembled as she brought it to her lips. For the first time since the fall, Clara felt like someone had seen her. Not just the bruises, not just the silence, but the part of her still trying to live. Outside, the pines stood tall and solemn, their snow-covered limbs drooping like forgotten memories. Inside, the fire glowed soft and amber. Clara, still weak but no longer cold, stirred beneath the woven wool. The lodge felt less like a shelter and more like a sanctuary. Stones had been carefully placed. The fire breathed gently. The scent of roasting potatoes mingled with the cedar smoke, and though the wind whispered against the walls, it never came in. The burlap sack still covered her head, but her hands were free. Each breath was painful, but each breath was proof. Someone had cared enough to keep her alive. She hadn't heard him return, but she knew he was there. Silver Wolf moved like the forest, silent, unseen, present. He had carried her from the snow, left her space to heal, and asked for nothing in return. Her fingers found the edge of the sack. Slowly, she pulled it off. Firelight greeted her first, then the quiet flicker of shadows across fur-lined walls. A wooden bowl sat beside her, the water within it trembling faintly. She leaned forward and caught her reflection. Bruises bloomed over her cheekbones. Her lips were dry, her hair matted and tangled, but her eyes, sharp, clear, were still hers. Near her hand lay a comb, carved from wood, a feather etched into the handle. It hadn't been placed as a gift nor a demand, just a quiet offering. Beside it, a pair of leather gloves, old and worn, size for a woman's hands. One seam was sewn in faded red thread. Clara reached for them, her fingers brushing against the softness. It wasn't just kindness. It was welcome. She picked up the comb and pulled it through her hair. Every tug stung. Every knot resisted. But she kept going. With each pass, a part of her whispered, "I'm still here." The flap of the lodge stirred. Silver Wolf entered again, a pot in his arms, and something inside her, small, bruised, aching, began to mend. He placed the pot beside the fire without a word. Then, with a small nod to the gloves and the bowl, he sat down again. Clara looked at him, truly looked. He couldn't have been more than 30, but his features were carved with the kind of strength that didn't shout. Stillness radiated from him. His presence filled the lodge like sage smoke, quiet, grounding, impossible to ignore. Then the sound of different footsteps broke the calm. A woman entered the lodge, older, her face lined by hard years and wind. She was wrapped in a heavy shawl and carried a basket of eggs in the crook of her arm. Suspicion clung to her like dust. Her eyes flicked toward Silverwolf, but when her gaze landed on Clara, she stopped. Her body stiffened. The eggs in her basket shifted with a soft clatter. "My God," the woman whispered. "Is that—" "She looks just like Mayor Vernon said she died." Clara tensed under her blanket. Her heartbeat thudded like a warning drum. Silver Wolf didn't so much as turn his head. His voice, when he spoke, was steady and even. "She is my guest. If you came to deliver food, do so. If you came to pass judgment, take it elsewhere." The woman hesitated. Her lips tightened, her eyes narrowing as though weighing the cost of saying more. Then, wordless, she set the basket by the fire and left. Clara stared down at the floor, hands clenched in the blanket. "They'll come," she whispered. "They'll find me. They'll take me back." Silverwolf crouched by the fire, moving a coal with a branch, the glow catching the edge of his cheekbone. "They won't," he said. "Not unless you want to be found." She turned to look at him. The firelight flickered in his eyes, calm, unwavering. And for the first time since she'd fallen, Clara believed him. Snow drifted softly outside, dusting the tall pines like breath caught in winter. Inside the lodge, the fire glowed low and warm, casting amber light along the walls and firs. In the quiet, the space had grown into something more than shelter. It had become a refuge. Clara hadn't spoken in 3 days. In that silence, she had watched Silverwolf move through his days with quiet certainty. He never asked for anything. He rarely spoke. He just worked, splitting wood, drying meat, boiling water, leaving a piece of warm cornbread by her bed each morning. Every act was small, but steady. He mended the collapsed lean-to behind the lodge. He repaired a broken fence by the creek. His hands were strong. His movements were never rushed. At first, Clara watched from bed, then from the doorway, her shawl drawn tight across her shoulders. The bruises on her face had begun to fade. The swelling in her ribs had eased. She moved carefully, but no longer with fear, and her eyes followed everything. In those quiet observations, something long buried began to return, an unfamiliar sense of safety. On the third night, as darkness stretched between the trees, Clara sat near the fire, across from him. Her hair was still damp from washing. She hadn't yet found a voice for everything stirring inside her, but the silence between them no longer frightened her. It belonged to them now. She studied him. The quiet power in his posture, the fire's glow softening the hard lines of his face. And behind all of it, a sorrow lingered like an old scar. "Why do you live alone?" she asked, her voice hoarse from disuse. Silverwolf looked into the fire for a long while before answering. "People leave me be," he said. "I prefer it that way." But something in his voice gave away the weight behind those words. Clara didn't press. She understood. Solitude wasn't always freedom. Sometimes it was just what was left behind. She nodded. He nodded back. Later that night, when she returned to her bedroll, she found something waiting for her. A small bundle, a square of folded linen, a bottle of ink, and a wooden pen. No message, no instruction, just an offering. Her hands trembled as she touched them. She hadn't written a single word since the day before they threw her from the cliff. Her name, her voice, her very will, it had all been taken. But this simple gift stirred something. That night, she lit a stub of candle and spread the linen across her lap. The pen felt strange in her grip, as if it belonged to someone stronger than her. Still, the words came. She wrote the truth about Vernon, about Amos, about what had been done to her. And then she wrote something more, that she was not broken, not a ghost, not a body meant to be forgotten. She was still here. She ended the letter with her name, not as a farewell, but as a beginning. At dawn, Clara didn't reach for her brush. Instead, she took Silver Wolf's hunting knife and walked the creek. She knelt, pulled her hair forward, and in a single motion cut it clean. The curls fell like shed skin into the frost. She looked at her reflection in the water. Her face was pale, her hair uneven, her eyes clear and steady. The girl in the white dress was gone. When she returned to the lodge, her chest ached with cold and uncertainty. Silver Wolf looked up from the fire. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. He nodded once, slow and sure, as though he had always known the strength she was only now discovering in herself. Clara, still without a new name but no longer invisible, felt something small and burning stir deep within her chest, a quiet fire she hadn't felt in years. She had not disappeared. She had survived, and whatever came next would be hers to choose. As dusk folded over the pines and the last of the snow melted into rivulets along the stone walls, the lodge grew still again. The sound of dripping water echoed softly, like distant footsteps from another life. Clara sat cross-legged near the fire, wrapped in a thick shawl. Her fingers traced the edge of the linen sheet in her lap, the ink still fresh beneath her nails. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. The silence around her now wasn't empty. It was hers. She had written the night before, a letter that bled out every unsaid thing she had carried for too long. And though it had lightened something in her chest, the silence still hung between her and the man who had dragged her back from death's edge, Silver Wolf. He sat across from her now, legs crossed, sharpening a hunting knife with the slow, rhythmic precision of someone who had done it 1,000 times. The fire crackled between them, its light flickering over the hard planes of his face, catching the sharp rise of his cheekbones and deepening the shadows beneath his tired, watching eyes. There was stillness in him, not the calm of peace, but the kind born of grief too long buried, of stories told only to the stars. She was the one who finally broke the hush, voice soft but steady. "Were you always here?" Her question wavered, reaching across the quiet like a hand held out. He didn't answer at once. The scrape of stone against steel slowed, then stopped altogether. "No," he said simply, the word hanging like smoke. He laid the knife down gently, turned his gaze to flames, and let the truth unravel. "They took me when I was 9, a missionary school, near Tucson. They cut off my hair, burned my clothes, gave me a Bible, gave me a name that didn't fit in my mouth, Joseph." Clara swallowed hard, the sound of it louder than the fire. "I stopped speaking my language," he continued, "not because I forgot it, but because no one wanted to hear it." He reached forward, nudged the glowing coal back into place with a stick. 3 years I stayed. Then I ran. Took me all winter to find my way back. But I did. His jaw tightened. I'm married. We had a son. Small thing, wild as wind, fast as shadow. His voice softened as the memory thinned, then broke apart entirely. Then the coughing came. First her, then him. By the time the moon turned twice, they were both gone. He didn't meet her eyes. Since then, I've been nowhere. Not of the village, not of the town. Just here. Clara felt something twist in her ribs, not from sorrow, but from recognition. His story didn't mirror hers, not exactly, but it moved beside hers like a second river, running the same direction. "My stepfather sold me," she said at last, the words fragile but real, "to Vernon, to pay a debt." Silver Wolf didn't interrupt, didn't nod, just listened. "I said no. I said I'd rather die. So they tried to make sure I did." Her voice broke, not from fear but from fire. "Thought they did." He reached behind him without a word, unwrapped a bundle of soft buckskin, and revealed a knife, solid, finely made, its carved handle etched in the form of a wolf mid-howl. He held it toward her. "Take it," he said. She hesitated. "It's not for killing," he added. "It's to remind you. You're not prey anymore. You're the hunter." Her fingers closed around the hilt, slowly, reverently. The metal was cool, the gesture warmer than any word. "Thank you," she breathed, barely above a whisper. Before he could reply, a sharp whistle split the quiet outside. Silver Wolf rose immediately, every line of him alert, ears tuned to a world she couldn't yet hear. A heartbeat later, the lodge's flap shifted and a young man entered, tall, lean, streaks of war paint marking his jaw, fire burning in his gaze. Iron Arrow. His expression twisted into a snarl when he saw Clara. "You brought her here?" he barked in their language. "A white girl? You think the tribe won't see?" Silver Wolf didn't flinch. "She was left for dead," he answered evenly. "I found her." Iron Arrow stepped closer, his gaze sharp as broken glass. "She'll bring trouble. You know how they are. Sickness. Soldiers. Lies." "She brings truth," Silver Wolf said. "She brings danger." Iron Arrow snapped. Clara rose to her feet, the knife in her hand, not raised, not pointed, just held. Not a threat, but a truth of her own. "I didn't ask to be saved," she said, "but I won't apologize for surviving." Iron Arrow looked between them, spit once on the packed dirt, then vanished into the trees like smoke. Silence rushed in behind him, heavier than before. Clara turned to Silver Wolf. "They'll come for me, sooner or later. Here." He nodded. "Then I want to meet them standing, not hiding." He studied her a moment. "I'll go with you. To town. To him." Her breath caught. "Are you sure?" "You carry the truth," he said. "Someone has to stand beside it." She looked down at the blade in her hand, and for the first time, she didn't see the broken girl they left hanging. She saw the woman who refused to stay down. The town of Birch Hollow hadn't changed. Its streets were still lined with dust and cold soot. The same porches, the same watching eyes, the same voices, louder in judgment than in kindness. But something in the air had shifted, some invisible line crossed. The morning Clara Halt returned, she didn't come cloaked or trembling. She walked to center town in the open, her spine unbent, wearing a sun-faded yellow dress she'd stitched back together herself. Every thread a defiance, every seam a scar that chose to heal. The hem brushed her boots as she passed the general store, the livery. People turned, eyes widened, whispers curled through the streets like wind. "That's her," someone breathed. "She's dead, isn't she?" "No," came the answer. "That's Clara Halt." Silver Wolf walked beside her like a shadow made flesh, steady and still, his silence louder than any weapon. He carried no rifle, no blade, only presence. By the time they reached the mayor's office, the crowd had thickened. Half a circle of faces, some curious, some cruel. The office itself loomed like a monument to pride, its green shutters closed tight against whatever truth they refused to see. Then the door slammed open. Vernon stepped out. Sweat slicked his neck, his expression curling into disbelief, then into something uglier. Well, he drawled as he came down the steps, boots thudding like gunshots. "Look what crawled up from the grave." He moved closer, voice oily with contempt. "Clara Halt, you really are a ghost." "Thought maybe the coyotes left nothing but bones," Vernon sneered, voice like rusted iron, but she didn't flinch. "You're not welcome here," he spat, his eyes gleaming with the confidence of a man used to owning things, used to watching others look down. "You belong to me. The agreement was signed. The church was ready. You ran. You fell. That's on you." Clara held his gaze steady, her voice level as stone. "I didn't fall," she said. "I was thrown." The crowd murmured, uneasy ripples spreading across the space like wind across tall grass. Vernon's lip curled in contempt. "You're confused, girl. Grief does that. Makes people imagine things. But I'm a man of the law, and the law says you were promised." Her answer cut through the morning like frost. "There is no law," she said, calm but unyielding. "Only your coin purse and a rope burned into my wrists." A woman gasped aloud. Somewhere nearby, a chair scraped across wood. Silver Wolf said nothing, only moved forward, slow and deliberate, until he stood beside her, not in front of Shield, but at her side to stand. "I hear her," he said, and though his tone was not raised, the weight of it shifted the very air, stilled the whispers. Clara stood taller. Then a new voice rose from the crowd, clear, steady, unmistakable. "I saw the marks," said Mrs. Godwin, the apothecary, her apron dusted in flower pollen, her face drawn tight with purpose as she pushed forward. "Rope burns. Deep, fresh. No one ties themselves like that." Vernon's face twisted. "That's speculation," he snapped. But another figure emerged, tall, lean, with a Bible folded between his hands. Reverend Carter. He cleared his throat. There was never a contract filed. No banns read. No wedding blessed by this church. He paused. There was no marriage. Color surged into the mayor's cheeks, a furious red. "You people forget who runs this town," he bellowed. But the silence that answered him was not fear. It was refusal. A voice in the crowd muttered, "Maybe we remember too well." Clara stepped forward, her fingers trembling just slightly as she reached into her shawl and pulled free a folded square of linen. "I wrote this for myself," she said, "but maybe now you need to hear it." She unfolded the cloth, her voice wavering once, then strengthening like a river in spring thaw. "I am Clara Holt. I was sold, bound, thrown from a cliff because I said no. I was told I was property. I was told silence was